Good morning and welcome to online gathering of Windsor Baptist Church.
Wherever you are and whatever hour you have a chance to tune in, thank you for joining us again for an hour of songs, prayers and teaching from the Gospel. Today we will also hear from Eduardo and Margot, our missionaries based in Peru, and Mark will be preaching on the text from Galatians chapter 6. My name is Jaro.
I am Camila, and together with
Carmel and Melanie,
we will be guiding you through today's service.
Since our gatherings moved online in March this year, David has offered us various ways to further engage with a particular passage of Scripture, with our church family, but also with others, with our neighbors, and with the wider community. And these ways would include those 5 questions, sometimes at the end of the sermon. Other times, we were encouraged to read a certain psalm for every day of the following week. We were challenged to write down a prayer of lament, or write down a prayer of thanksgiving. Write down a prayer including questions, how long and why, and then bring those questions and those prayers to God. Using the walk, pray and talk resources from Donna, we were encouraged to walk through our neighborhoods and pray for our neighborhoods as well. How wonderful was the challenge to spend 2 hours in silence. This is one of my favorite, and I went for a long walk along Belfast Loch. I was sitting on the rocks, just walking, sitting, not talking, listening. And then another favorite of mine was joining in with one other family to watch Sunday sermon together and then share a meal, perhaps a walk. The reason why I'm listing these is because it is never too late to do any of these challenges, even if you have missed them at the time, or to repeat those that you found particularly helpful. And you can find these and others on the church website.
Carmel is now going to pray, and then we'll sing 2 songs.
Come, now is the time to worship and anchor of hope. Let's pray. Our Father, we thank you for this day, and we praise you for the scattered church gathering online. Although there are things happening in the world that I do not understand, we thank you for this hour of worship, and we pray that it brings us to renewal and strength. Let the words of our praise and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. Amen.
Come, now is the time to worship. Come, now is the time to give your heart. Come, just as you are to worship. Just as you are before your God. Come. One day every tongue will confess you are God. One day every knee will bow. Still the greatest treasure remains for those who gladly choose you now. Come, now is the time to worship. Come, now is the time to give your heart. just as you are to worship. Come, just as you are before your God. Come. One day every tongue will confess you are God. One day every knee will bow. Still the greatest treasure remains for those who gladly choose you now. Come, now is the time to worship. Come, now is the time to give your heart. Come, just as you are to worship. Come, just as you are before your God. Come. Marvelous, wonderful, infinite God, author of all that is good, faithful provider and giver of life, source of all power and love. Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise, refuge of strength to the end, righteous Redeemer and mighty to save. He's the anchor of hope for the souls of men. Gracious, compassionate, merciful God, radiant, holy delight, beautiful Father, victorious Son, source of unchangeable light. Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise, refuge of strength to the end, righteous Redeemer and mighty to save. He's the anchor of hope for the souls of men. You are light in the dark, you are healing for the broken heart. You are hope, you are Lord, you are life, you are love that endures. Powerful, constant, unwavering God, shepherd who comes for the lost, rock of salvation, remarkable love, Savior who died on the cross. Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise, refuge of strength to the end, righteous Redeemer and mighty to save. He's the anchor of hope for the souls. Oh, he's the anchor of hope for the souls. Oh, he's the anchor of hope for the souls of men.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
For those of you who don't know us, I'm Margot,
I am Eduardo.
and we are missionaries sent out from Windsor to work with Latin Link in Lima, Peru. This morning we thought we'd give you a little update to what is happening here with us. By the time you see this, we will probably be in day 140 since the country of Peru was declared in a state of emergency. And we have had a very strict quarantine as well However, on the 1st of July, the quarantine was lifted in Lima, but this wasn't due to the fact that things are getting better here. It's mainly because over 70% of the population work informally, and basically if people don't work, they can't eat. So the president has been trying to restart the economy as well. So for that, the quarantine has been lifted in Lima. To be honest, the situation here is grim. The health system has completely collapsed and there are new cases and deaths every day. So we would appreciate your prayers really for Peru. It's really, really difficult because in many hospitals there aren't enough intensive care beds and there isn't enough oxygen either. So families are having to go out and buy the oxygen for their loved ones, and this can mean in some places that they are queuing as soon as the curfew is lifted in the morning at 4 a.m. To get oxygen for their loved ones and to treat them at home because there's no room in the hospitals. And even on the news reports that we watch each day, I mean, there have been people who've been treated in their cars lined up outside the hospital. So it really is a grim picture, and it's very, very sad that we're in this situation. So even though the quarantine has been lifted here in Lima, we still can't have any events or social gatherings. So in many ways, we still feel that we are in quarantine, because the risks are even higher than they were before because there's so many people moving around the city. So like many of you, I guess you've been depending a lot on Skype and Zoom for meetings and just being in contact with people, which has been a real blessing for us as well. You know, we've been really burdened for the people here in Peru and for their situation, and yet God has been answering prayer, and through unexpected donations that we've received, you know, God has laid on our heart a project that is on the outskirts of Lima, and it's a community that's very poor, and they have got together to have an olla commune, which is basically a community pot or a bit like a soup kitchen. So where they're trying to get ingredients together and to cook and share with their local community. So through donations that we've received, we've been able to be part of that and to be able to coordinate and get food supplies to them so that they can feed their community. And at the moment, you know, they've been preparing meals for about 450 people. And we've also been able to get like food parcels to single mothers and to the elderly as well. So we feel very privileged to be here and to be in that position that we can show God's love to others and that we can be somehow God's hands and feet at this time. And I think more importantly, it's, you know, to have those contacts with people as well, and that they will know that God loves them and that they will know that He sees them and He knows their needs. So we want to say thank you to you as well, our family in Windsor, for all your support and for your prayers for us. And we would ask that you would continue to keep us in your prayers and for the people of Peru at this time, and that God would be glorified and that many will come to know Him during this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Let us pray. Father God, thank you for your presence in our lives. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for the encouragement we can receive when we listen to the online gatherings of our church. Thank you, Lord, that even though we are not together physically, that we can pray together because you are with us anywhere we are at the minute. And we would like to lift our voices and pray for those in our church family who need your help, who need to feel your presence more than anywhere, any other time. I ask, Lord, for Barbara Johnston's mom, who is in hospital, who has suffered stroke. Lord, your healing hand and your presence with her. I ask for the family, for Barbara's sisters and Barbara's dad, who are caring for the mum, who are supporting her in this difficult situation. Lord, I pray for Eduardo and Margot in Peru. You see, Lord, the difficult situation in Peru, when so many people's livelihoods have been destroyed. So many people cannot even afford hospital bills. Lord, you are there and you see, and we ask, Lord, that you would continue to work, that you would work through Eduardo and Margot, and you would bless them. I ask, Lord, for the situation with the residency for Margot, that she would receive some positive news. And Lord, I ask for the prison service that it could resume soon, that the female prisoners could hear about you, hear the good news for their lives. Lord, thank you that Eduardo has been able to deliver messages of encouragement online to his team. Would you, Lord, bless their work, even in this situation that is so difficult for us. But for you, God, nothing is impossible, and in you is our hope. I pray, Lord, for Pat Hildrup. Thank you that you are with her, and we as a church family are thinking about her in this moment. Lord, thank you for your grace. Thank you for your patience with us. Thank you that you will be with us this week. As the church was scattered, everybody in a different place, but we worship one true God. And thank you, Lord, for your love, for the salvation. In Jesus' name, amen.
We are now going to sing.
We are going to sing 2 songs called Majesty and Salvation Belongs to God.
Here I am, humbled by your majesty, covered by your grace so free. Here I am, knowing I'm a sinful man, covered by the blood of the Lamb. Now I found the greatest love of all is mine, since you laid down your life, the greatest sacrifice. Majesty, your grace has found me just as I am, empty-handed but alive in your hands. Here I am, humbled by the love that you give, forgiven so that I can forgive. Here I stand, knowing that I'm your desire, sanctified by glory and fire. Now I found the greatest love of all is mine, since you laid down your life, the greatest sacrifice. Majesty, grace has found me just as I am, empty-handed but alive in your hands. We're singing majesty, majesty. Forever I am changed by your love, in the presence of your majesty. Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and unto the Lamb praise and glory, wisdom and thanks, honor and power and strength. To our God forever and ever, be to our God forever and ever, be to our God forever and ever. Amen. And we the redeemed shall be strong in purpose and unity, declaring aloud praise and glory, wisdom and thanks, honor and power and strength. Be to our God forever and ever, be to our God forever and ever, be to our God forever and ever. Amen. Be to our God forever and ever, be to our God forever and ever, be to our God forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning. For those who don't know me, my name is Mark. I'm on staff here at Windsor, and it's great to be able to share with you today. As many of you know, we as a family, we moved house at the start of lockdown. I definitely wouldn't advise moving house during the middle of a global pandemic, but one of the blessings was moving to a house with a garden. And it wasn't too long before we jumped on the bandwagon, like the rest of the country it seems, and created or made our own vegetable patch. And you can see here from Toby, he's helping me in the early stages as we created the raised beds from some old sleepers that were lying about, and got to work filling in the vegetable patch with soil and compost. And I know that we weren't the only ones. Many of you did the same. You created your own vegetable patch. You dabbled in growing your own during lockdown. And here are a few photos to show that, of you enjoying your own patch. And it looks like some of you will be self-sustainable by the end of 2020. And so for us, it was a little bit of a risky adventure. Not because of coronavirus, but because pre-lockdown, we weren't known for keeping our plants alive, never mind growing vegetables. But enthusiasm goes a long way. Being complete novices, there was much to learn about growing our own. But sure enough, by mid-April, we had the seeds planted, some in the vegetable patch, others on the windowsill, basking in the sunshine. And we waited to see what would happen. Would anything appear? Would the seeds germinate and begin to grow? And we waited and waited. Turns out my 2-year-old has more patience than I do. But eventually, After a few weeks, we saw something. We noticed little green shoots sprouting, beginning to appear, poking their heads through the soil. And the seeds that we'd sown were beginning to grow. And this morning we're going to be thinking about the seeds that we sow and the reaping that we get in return. And so we're not just going to be talking about vegetables, but follow with me. The concept of sowing and reaping is mentioned in the Bible throughout the Old and New Testament, and you're maybe already jumping to stories or passages in your own mind. Not each reference relates to the same concept, however. At times, the mention of sowing is in relation to God's word, like in Luke 8. At other times, it's symbolism for the kingdom of God, like in Matthew 13. And today, we're going to look at it in the context of Galatians 6 and what Paul is saying to the believers there. So we'll read it together in a moment, but first, maybe this is your opportunity to pause, hit the pause button and go grab a Bible, a notepad, a pen if you haven't got them already. So what should we know before we jump into chapter 6? Well, this is Paul, formerly Saul, writing around 50 AD. The churches most likely in southern Galatia, modern-day Turkey. And these churches are the ones that he founded on his missionary journey, so they're close to his heart. And the overall theme of the book is justification by faith. Some of you will remember growing up as a child and learning about justification using a little phrase, just as if I'd never sinned. That's it in a nutshell. Jesus died for our sins, and if we put our faith in him, if we put our trust in him, then we are justified, we're acquitted. You and I are declared righteous in his sight. Sin no longer separates us, and we can live in that right relationship with God and with others. That's justification in a nutshell. And so that's the overall theme of Galatians. And that's why sometimes the book is referred to as a shorthand or a sketch of Romans. And here in Galatians, Paul is writing to set things straight. Legalistic Judaizers had come in and were telling the Galatian believers that they must be circumcised and keep the law of Moses in order to be saved. Paul spells it out in very persuasive tones that salvation is through faith in Jesus Christ alone. No work can earn salvation. In other words, Paul is encouraging these young believers to hold on to their freedom. Hold on. Don't get caught up in legalism. Live under grace. Live by the Spirit. And this is important for us to hold on to as we jump into chapter 6 and we hear Paul talking about doing good. So let's read it together. Galatians 6, 1 to 10. And Father, as we read your word today, would your word read us? Come, Holy Spirit, lead and guide us so that we would follow Jesus more closely in the days ahead. And all God's people said, Amen. Verse 1. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one of you should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone else, for each one should carry their own load. Nevertheless, the one who receives instruction in the word should share all good things with their instructor. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. And so let's step through this passage together, and I'll drop in a few comments as we go, particularly for the first section, and then say a little bit more as we approach those end verses. Brothers and sisters, In other words, church family, if someone is caught in a sin, if they have, as James describes, been lured away, enticed by their own evil desires, enticed by the desires of the flesh, the bit of our hearts bent away from God, which then gives birth to sin. If someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit, hopefully the majority of the church, should restore that person. That's always God's heart, isn't it? To restore gently. This is the relational tone of the family of followers of Jesus, gentleness. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Here Paul is saying, keep a close eye on your own hearts, or you may be drawn away by your own fleshy desires. No one is immune from this. No one is immune from temptation. Verse 2, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. It seems in this context it's to do with temptation. If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Proverbs 16, it reminds us, pride comes before a fall. Let's not fool or deceive ourselves into thinking we're stronger than we are. Each one should test their own actions. It calls for self-examination. Then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone. For each one should carry their own load. And as we know, comparison steals our joy. It robs us of contentment. And it highlights and reveals our immaturity and our foolishness. And yet it's so easy to slip into that groove, the comparison groove, especially in our digital age. Verse 6, nevertheless, the one who receives instruction in the word should share all good things with their instructors. Now we get into the part where I really want us to focus our attention. This next little unit of 3 verses can be seen as a summary of 3 key themes that have been previously discussed by Paul. If you want to flick back to chapter 5, go down to verse 13 to 15, we see Paul here is encouraging the Galatian believers to utilize their freedom by serving one another in love. That's theme 1. Then staying in chapter 5, if you roll down to verse 16 through to 26, we see the stark contrast between the fruit of the flesh versus the fruit of the Spirit. And that's theme 2. And then in the early part of chapter 6, the bit that we've just read, verse 1 to 6, Paul again urges these believers to do good. And one of the ways he tells them to do good is by restoring anyone who slips up. 3 themes, all emphasized, all tied in together in the verses that now follow. So let's look more closely at verse 7. Do not be deceived. This is a warning from Paul. The potential to be deceived must be great. Therefore, he's saying to these believers in Galatia, don't be under any illusion. God cannot be mocked. In other words, remember who God is. He's sovereign. He's ruler over all. God of justice. In the long run, justice will be served. Those who mock and ignore and mistreat God suffer the consequences of their folly and actions. A man reaps what he sows. Here, Paul uses this word picture of sowing and reaping, a simple yet familiar concept to his audience. And this agricultural image is a metaphor for deeper heart stuff that's going on. Sowing and reaping is a law of nature. It's a law of returns, to use a human term. It was no surprise to us when we planted those lettuce seeds and those carrot seeds all those weeks ago, that when those began to grow, that we got lettuce leaves and carrots. We had much to learn, but that we knew that much. And it's a basic principle of life, isn't it? It's universally accepted. You reap what you sow. And if Paul was speaking today, may have used phrases like no pain, no gain. You get out what you put in. What goes around comes around, all communicating the same principle. A man or a woman reaps what he, she sows. None of us who sat around on the sofa during lockdown now expect to be able to run a 10k or run it easily. And the seeds that we've sown have now resulted in a fairly slow, red-faced 5k walk run. And this principle applies as much in the spiritual world as the physical. Paul applies this law of nature to our spiritual formation. And he expands for those listening. Verse 8, whoever sows to please their flesh, that corner of our heart bent away from God towards self-gratification, self-promotion. Whoever sows to that part to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. And so Paul doesn't mix his words. And his hearers would have heard just moments before what the acts of the flesh, that sinful nature, look like. Chapter 5. He's tuning their hearts, tuning their minds to the spiritual dimension, to the internal tug of war for their affections. We might be separated by centuries of history, and yet we're no different. There's a spiritual battle raging within. The question is, where are we sowing? James, writing around the same time, reminds us, after that evil desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's fully grown, gives birth to death, gives birth to destruction. And so what's the alternative? What is the better story for these believers and for us today? Paul goes on. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, those who belong to Jesus. They've turned away from sin. They've willingly nailed their flesh, or that sinful nature, to the cross of Jesus. The capacity to sin is there for sure still, but they have been set free from its power and no longer have to give in to it. They and we must daily commit our sinful tendencies to God's control. Daily crucify them and draw on the Spirit's power to overcome them. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. And Paul is so helpfully joining the dots for the believers then and for us today. He's reminding us of the bigger picture, helping us to see the sum of all our choices. Each time we sow or give into the flesh, into those self-centered desires, we plant something in the soil of our hearts. And when that seed begins to take root and grow, eventually it produces a character. An everyday example for me is Netflix. I love to get into a good series, but if I'm serious about following Jesus, about becoming more and more like Jesus, I got to ask myself the question, by watching Netflix, am I sowing to the flesh or am I sowing to the Spirit? I can remember the last time I watched Netflix and felt more Christ-like after watching it. I don't know, maybe it is possible. I'm maybe just old school, but TV series, they're designed to engage and entertain our flesh. And so it's maybe time for us to at least ask a question and become more aware of where we are sowing. The opposite is equally true. Each time we sow to, say yes to, open ourselves to the Spirit, we plant something deep in the soil of our hearts. And that seed takes root and it grows and it yields a character, leading us to greater Christ-likeness. Ralph Waldo Emerson is known for having said, sow a thought and reap an action. Sow an act and reap a habit. Sow a habit and reap a character. Sow a character and reap a destiny. Or a similar thought, we make our decisions and then our decisions turn around and make us. Paul is saying in Galatians, this concept of sowing is the process of spiritual formation. And we're either being formed into or deformed away from the likeness of Jesus, our Saviour. And that's why, for example, the spiritual disciplines are so key. Integrating these core holy habits into our lives sows to the Spirit. And each time we choose to sow to the Spirit, we're leaning into God, all that He has for us in this life and the life to come. And we're cultivating those habits that lead us towards Jesus, His view of ourselves and of others and of the world around us. And the more we choose flesh or choose Spirit over flesh, we are set free to the life that Jesus has for us. We open ourselves up to the power of the Spirit, the same power that brought Jesus back from the grave. And so, where am I sowing? Where are you sowing? What are we allowing to take root in the soil of our hearts? Is it leading us more towards Jesus or away from him? And what will we reap, both now and in the future? So often it's so much more than the bigger, major life decisions. It's about the everyday choices that we're making. There's so much more that we could say, but how does Paul close this little section? The Galatian believers, under those negative influence of the legalistic Judaizers, are perhaps feeling weary, they're discouraged, they're unsure. And what does Paul say to them? Verse 9, let us not become weary in doing good. Paul gives them courage for the road ahead. He says, don't give up in the fight against your flesh. Sow to the Spirit. Remember the big picture. He is saying, don't give up doing all the instructions that you've heard me speak about up to now. Keep going. For at the proper time you will reap a harvest if you don't give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. I'm so thankful we didn't get weary looking after our little veggie patch, because I have to be honest, the early days were tough. Nothing much was happening, no sign of grain, just soil. But thankfully we didn't give up, and now we're enjoying the first fruits of our veggie patch. Church family, let's not get weary. Let's not get weary of doing good, for at the proper time, in God's time, we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. And so let's not tire of online church. Yes, it's different. It's not the same. But let's not weary of gathering or meeting with our small group. Let's keep joining with others. Let's keep inviting one another to our homes for meals and for picnics together. Don't skip our routine with Jesus in the mornings. Just because it's summer, don't get weary of saying yes to the Spirit and his deep work in our hearts as we seek to follow Jesus. Let's not become weary of looking out for and being intentional with our neighbours. God has placed us around people. Yes, lockdown may have eased, but I sense lockdown has gifted us time. Time at home, time to get to know our neighbours that little bit more, get to know our communities, perhaps like never before. And we've been gifted time to pray for and to pray with those around us, to ask questions, to express care, to be the hands and feet of Jesus. Keep shining bright, and let's continue to care and do good to those in the family. It is by our love for one another that the world will know that we belong to Jesus, and may that be so. And so as we finish, you might be asking, what is the bottom line? A man reaps what he sows. A man reaps what he sows. It's an inescapable law of nature, and it speaks to our spiritual formation. And each choice we make, big and small, whether it's to do with our time, our talents, our treasure, we can either give into the flesh and those desires, or we can live a better story. We can sow to the Spirit and allow him and his power to work in our lives, changing us little by little into the likeness of Jesus. Praise be to God for his amazing grace in Christ that is available when we come quickly to confess the times where we have messed up, we've got it wrong, we've given into the flesh, we've sown foolishly. God longs to welcome us back, cleanse us and lead us onwards. As we begin to think about and process what God is saying to us today from his illuminating word, here are a few suggestions, a few questions. Don't be overwhelmed. There's 3 parts. It's good to have options. You can screenshot these or maybe take a photograph of them so you have them. But firstly, discuss with others, maybe the folk that you're watching with right now. What stood out to you from Galatians 6? And what questions do you have from the passage? And then maybe when you take some time by yourself later on today or later this week, reflect personally. What have I sown in lockdown? What am I going to sow this week, this month, this year? What is it that I want to reap in the future? Perhaps reflect on this phrase, we reap what we sow, more than we sow and later than we sow. And let's pray, asking God for wisdom, that wisdom that James speaks about, to sow wisely in the days ahead. Or maybe you want to take an audit. Summer's a great time for a self-audit, to step back and evaluate, maybe with a friend or a spouse, maybe even your child, a mentor, small group leader. And consider the 3 areas below for starters. Ask the question, what does my, for example, time reveal about how I sow? And by the power of the Spirit in us, may we be known to sow well for the glory of God. And may God produce a mighty harvest in our lives and the lives of many others in the generations to come. Amen.
This is my prayer in the desert, when all that's within me feels dry. This is my prayer in my hunger and need. My God is the God who provides. This is my prayer in the fire, in weakness or trial or pain. There is a faith proved of more worth than gold, so refine me, Lord, through the flame. I will bring praise, I will bring praise. No weapon formed against me shall remain. I will rejoice, I will declare, God is my victory and He is here. This is my prayer in the battle, when triumph is still on its way. I am a conqueror and co-heir with Christ, so firm on His promise I'll stand. I will bring praise, I will bring praise. No weapon formed against me shall remain. I will rejoice, I will declare, God is my victory and He is here. All of my life, in every season, You are still God. I have a reason to sing. I have a reason to worship. All of my life, in every season, You are still God. I have a reason to sing. I have a reason to worship. I will bring praise, I will bring praise. No weapon formed against me shall remain. I will rejoice, I will declare, God is my victory and He is here. This is my prayer in the harvest, when favor and providence flow. I know I'm filled to be emptied again. The seed I've received I will sow.
Let us join our hearts in closing prayer. Lord, thank you for the gift of your word. Let us follow, Lord, what we have been taught today. Thank you that wherever our destination will be next week, that you are coming with us anywhere we go, and that we can enjoy your presence and be blessed. Grant us peace in our hearts and give us courage to follow your guidance. In Jesus' name, we believe and pray.